Story 1. Brexit destroyed my online business. I received many orders from Europe. After Brexit, customers had to pay import fees and value-added tax, which they never had to pay before. They did not want to pay these extra costs, so they stopped ordering. My sales declined steadily until I had to close my shops. Story 2. Brexit has increased queues for British citizens at airports in Europe due to additional checks and passport stamping. It has also limited stays to 90 days within 180 days. Reduced opportunities for people from England, Scotland, and Wales to live, work, study, and retire freely across Europe. Northern Irish citizens retain these benefits as they can apply for an Irish passport. Contributed to labor shortages in key industries such as hospitality, farming, health, and social care despite record levels of immigration from the rest of the world. Added administrative bureaucracy for importers and exporters, widening the trade deficit and reducing business investment and foreign direct investment. For any British citizen who wishes to live, work, study, travel for longer than 90 days, export to, or import from the European Union, circumstances are objectively worse. Story 3. Brexit was probably the biggest influence on why my business ultimately failed. Goods and supplies I needed became incredibly expensive to acquire from the European Union. In some cases, my suppliers stopped shipping to the United Kingdom altogether. For me to ship my goods in the other direction into the European Union, it became more expensive and complicated to deal with. I lost a massive chunk of business and all of the convenience of trading in the European Union overnight. So in my eyes, Brexit is a complete failure. Story 4. One of the reasons people voted for the British exit from the European Union was to stop immigration. Last year, we had 700,000 net migration. This does not sound like a great success to me. Story 5. Brexit contributed to the downfall of my business. If you ask me, no. Story 6. In terms of actual impact on a normal person, all Brexit has done for me is made it more expensive or difficult to buy things from Europe. Many places now do not offer shipping to the United Kingdom. Made it more difficult to travel to Europe. In my jobs, in the hospital laboratory, we had a major issue because all our equipment is provided by Roche, a Swiss company, and all the supplies we buy have to move through Europe. There was a brief period when a warehouse relocated, which caused us to be unable to provide blood tests for anything but the most urgent cases. There was additional difficulty with German companies over import taxes and similar issues, causing a shortage of other materials. All is resolved now, but it was a tense few months. At the university laboratory, in addition to the above difficulties with suppliers, being excluded from the European Union's Horizon program resulted in a significant loss of funding for British science. The number of European Union students has also dropped, so due to the decrease in funding, our financial department is enforcing strict controls. This has led to situations such as having to obtain 3 alternative quotes for machinery manufactured by a single company, even when the grant specifically covers that equipment. Story 7. Migration from other places has greatly increased. Legal migration has tripled and illegal migration has increased tenfold. Our withdrawal from the Dublin regulation means that we can no longer return illegal migrants to the last European Union country they passed through. Story 8. Speaking as someone from Northern Ireland, Brexit has done 2 good things for us. The Windsor Framework, which keeps us under some of the European Union rules and allows us to trade in both the United Kingdom and European Union markets, making us a prime spot for investment. It has also sped up the talk of a united Ireland as well. Story 9. I think it says a lot that Farage, Johnson, and others are no longer shouting about how they made it happen. Story 10. Everyone I know who voted for the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union now claims 1. The information about what would happen was not available. It was 2. They were lied to. Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage have always been incapable of honesty. Many people close to both of them have said so. 3. It was not done properly. What they wanted would never have been legal or feasible. Story 11. Not a British citizen, but I would say it has been an unmitigated success. We used to have many debates about leaving the European Union in my country, Denmark, and there was general dissatisfaction with the European Union. Since Brexit, all these debates have stopped, and the country has unified much more around the ideas of the European Union. Even the most anti-European Union parties no longer openly talk about leaving the European Union. So to all British people, the rest of the European Union thanks you for doing the experiment. Story 12. Brexit is a failure and should never have gone through. There should have been contingencies in place as it was such a close vote. Being in Northern Ireland, I have just been refused free biscuits with a business purchase because, sorry, we can only send them to the mainland, was written on the parcel. I can buy the same biscuits in Asda. Considering we are meant to have the best of both the United Kingdom and the European Union, it is a nightmare getting companies to send to us. Perhaps it is just the industry I am in, but the whole thing is nonsense. Story 13. It is difficult to determine whether Brexit has been successful, as those who voted for it have never clearly explained what it was intended to accomplish. I suppose we will never know. Story 14. Not from the United Kingdom, but from the European Union. I work in a logistics company. Many of our customers who used to ship or buy a lot from the United Kingdom stopped doing so because it is difficult to manage customs. Story 15. Brexit made me realize how racist and terrible the people I live near are. I am in the Southwest. My mother is French, and people asked after Brexit when she was going back to her country. She has been in England longer than she has been in France. Learning that the people you live near are so racist and xenophobic is such an odd thing. Not to mention, because of this, I cannot have my partner move to England. It genuinely ruined a lot of future plans I had, and I am one of the lucky ones due to having dual citizenship with France. But of everything we were promised if we left the European Union, none of that came true. So no, it has not been a success. It has been terrible, and it still is. Story 16. It has resulted in an increase in the number of non-European Union immigrants, which infuriates the bigots who voted for British exit, expecting the opposite. Story 17. It has been the disaster experts predicted. I thankfully escaped before it really impacted me, but the business my company used to do with the European Union is now gone. People voting for Brexit caused this. I will never forgive it or allow anyone who voted for Brexit to downplay it. It is a disaster. Story 18. If it had been a success, why have none of the right-wing parties campaigned boasting about its successes? Story 19. It was a disaster for the man who called the referendum David Cameron. He only called it in an attempt to keep the Conservative Party together and try to appease the United Kingdom Independence Party. Now look where that got his beloved party. Completely wiped out. At least he was made a lord out of it eventually. So it is not all a loss for poor Dave. Story 20. I was born in England but have spent the majority of my adult life living abroad. So I was born in England but was mostly made in Europe. I saw what the United Kingdom was about to do to itself and thought, no way will they fall for this. No way will they be pig-headed enough, stupid enough, arrogant enough, or deluded enough to actually shoot themselves in both feet. But then I looked at who the architects of Brexit were. The opportunists, the dishonest dealers trying desperately to avoid having their tax loopholes closed, trying hard not to be held accountable, and the grubby financiers who just wanted to make money from shorting the pound. And I thought, surely the British are not stupid enough to think these poor excuses for humans are their friends. Surely they don't think these grubby bottom feeders actually represent them? But they did shoot themselves in both feet. And COVID-19 looked like it was going to cover up the damage that had been done for a while. But now the debt is due and a different party is in power, so guess who will get the blame when the money runs out? 17 million people, most of whom quite vocally outed themselves. It's quite handy knowing who all the very stupid, dishonest people are, but the damage is done regardless. Not just to the United Kingdom's prospects, but to the reputations of its people. They were told by everyone in the entire world, but they wouldn't listen. They were told that the leaders were lying to them. They wouldn't listen. World leaders told them, the International Monetary Fund told them, everyone who has spent a lifetime studying economics and politics told them, but they still thought they knew best. That is prescription-level arrogance and mental asylum-worthy levels of mental illness. Brexit doesn't affect me because I have dual citizenship, property abroad including in Europe, enough money to weather the effects, and friends in Europe who know I'm not one of the turkeys who voted for Christmas. I'm not worried about me or mine, but I am deeply concerned for the innocent 16 million plus who didn't vote for this colossal stupidity. Story 21. No. There is a vocal minority who will not be happy until we uproot the island and drift off into the North Atlantic, leaving Ireland behind to make excuses for us. Story 22. It has had no benefit at all for the common working person. Maybe if you are already very rich, you gain something from it. Maybe. The main point I want to make is how difficult it is to translate from British English to American English that the Brexit vote was a final farewell for the baby boomer generation. They grew up indoctrinated from birth with the belief that Britain is the greatest empire ever to exist. Their vote for Brexit was, in their view, a defiant assertion that Britain remains the world's arbiter of sovereignty and is superior to the European Union. In practical terms, it is impossible to translate this precisely. The closest understanding is that a large group of people hold deeply misguided ideas about Britain's place in the world, and they narrowly won the vote. Story 23. If you are asking on Reddit, you will have people tell you that Brexit failed. If you were to ask an unbiased person from the United Kingdom, they would tell you the real truth. Brexit has harmed the United Kingdom's economy every day for the past 4.5 years. Story 24. Great success. I moved countries 6 years ago and became a Swedish citizen yesterday. I do not support Brexit. I am never going back. Story 25. What Brexit supporters never understood was that the European Union was not holding them back. They seemed to feel like the European Union was something that Britain did a lot for and gave a lot to, without getting anything back. Because European Union laws superseded United Kingdom laws, the United Kingdom voluntarily allowed this. An act of parliament had made the European Union sovereign, and an act of parliament could undo it, and it did not join the euro. This meant that decisions that concerned the United Kingdom were apparently handled by Brussels bureaucrats. In fact, the European Union has such democratic unity that it is unlikely that any of its laws would ever be much of a problem for any member state anyway. Also, as an economic union, the point is that these countries join together to maintain and improve economies and trade. It is supposed to support member states. As all states have the same laws, it makes it less complicated for businesses. The waits afterwards were terrible because the extra checks increased travel times. States from outside the Union had added tariff costs for trading with it, which the United Kingdom now has. As a result, the economy has been negatively affected. How much so is yet to be seen. Nearly every economic expert agrees. Most people who voted for Brexit did not think about the business or legal side, but instead about cultural issues like sovereignty and immigration, which did not actually matter. It is true, in the European Union, citizens can move to other countries easily. So getting rid of the European Union means we lose European Union citizens as immigrants. Also, the refugee crisis caused by Syria in 2015, when thousands of Syrian refugees were drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get into Europe, had some people nervous that the European Union would pressure member states to take many of them. But immigration in general is only indirectly affected by Brexit, and really, these people should have just voted for less immigration but thought about other issues when it came to Brexit. I do not think the European Union affected sovereignty much because it is usually trade laws to make things easier. It is only small things that I would say the European Union gets wrong, but usually countries are able to ignore this. It is only supposed to support everything, for instance, clamping down on tax avoidance and unfairness. It is still hard to avoid the European Union these days anyway. Story 26. Many people in senior technology positions moved to North America for better pay, and I was one of them. It has been a success for me by forcing me to leave the country where I was born. The British pound dropping, along with other factors, allowed me to pay off my student loans quickly and affordably. For the country, no, it has been a disaster. Story 27. Well, I am from Scotland. We, as a country, voted to stay in the European Union, but instead were handcuffed to and dragged out by England. Despite that, it has been an amazing opportunity for the very rich and powerful. Everyone else, not so much. I do not think the United Kingdom has ever been less globally relevant. Even the people who voted to leave are not happy because, shockingly, leaving did not actually solve any of their problems. Story 28. I was happily living and working in Spain when the British exit vote happened. Now I am back in England, working in a shattered and underfunded National Health Service, wishing fervently that I was back in Madrid, and this was all just a nasty dream caused by a late dinner. Story 29. It made my French wife want to return home within the withdrawal agreement deadline. I am now stuck in France. Please send help. Story 30. Okay, so imagine you are at a party. You do not like the music, so you speak to the host and decide that in a couple of songs, they will play something you like. Now, imagine that instead you decide to leave. You go to your house next door. You can still hear the music, but because you left, you have no influence over what is played. That is Brexit. The same things are happening. It is just you now cannot influence a decision at all because the United Kingdom no longer sits at that table. Nigel Farage is a traitor. He still has European citizenship. His wife is German. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson was not even born in the United Kingdom, and he has also managed to retain multinational citizenship. It is the rest of us who have been left to deal with the problems. Story 31. In the end, they are still subject to European Union rules and regulations because the European Union is a much larger market, so products are made to be European Union compliant. For example, the type of caps on soda with the leash to the bottle is a European Union regulation, but soda in England is sold with them too now. England no longer has a voice at the table to change, block, or introduce regulations for the European Union as an outsider. They gave away power with nothing to show for it. Story 32. I moved to Norway shortly after and feel the effects every day. I am seriously burnt out in my job, but my visa is restrictive. I am only allowed to work in a very specific niche role or I have to reapply. There is only a limited time I can be out of work if I want to retrain. I do not have the same freedoms as my European Union friends and colleagues. It is a shame because I love this country and would love to stay, but I will probably end up moving back soon. Brexit has dramatically affected my entire future. Likely who I marry, who my children are, my career, and where I live. Pretty much everything. I imagine there are similar stories from many other United Kingdom nationals who wanted to live abroad. Story 33. I have a few British friends. One guy is fairly low on the economic scale and he really hates it. Many things he used to buy cheaply have drastically increased in price. One friend who travels a lot for work hates it because travel has become more difficult. One is wealthy and another is a laborer on a farm just north of the Scottish border. They do not see a difference. I have asked this a few times. Story 34. Still waiting for the benefits they promised. We are going to give $350 million to the National Health Service. Okay, then why is the National Health Service still in crisis? Why are so many of the people who actually work within it constantly going on strike? Oh, because that money was never going to go to the National Health Service. It was going to go to Boris, Mickey, and Nigel's wealthy friends. Story 35. I was negatively affected by Brexit. It has made my life much more difficult. I work in aircraft maintenance. There is plenty of well-paying work all over Europe. I used to be able to secure a decent contract very easily. Not anymore. Must have the right to work in Europe is in all the job advertisements now. United Kingdom aircraft maintenance jobs are not as good now due to changes in the IR35 tax rules. But on the bright side, I have a nice blue passport. Story 36. Personally, my online sales to the European Union dried up overnight. I instantly lost 30 to 40% of my business, which had taken me years to build. Everyone I know in this industry experienced the same. I know many United Kingdom-based businesses that moved parts of their operations to countries in the European Union to retain their customers. This resulted in downsizing their operations in the United Kingdom. Due to the impact of COVID-19 and the situation in Ukraine, some have managed to mitigate the damage to our economy caused by this terrible decision. The people responsible have disappeared, and nobody seems interested in holding them accountable. This issue is so toxic that it has poisoned our political landscape. The media and politicians are afraid to even mention it. It has damaged our standing in the world and has only benefited powers that want to see the United Kingdom and the European Union weaker. There were genuine concerns about our membership in the European Union and the accountability of the organization, but the vote and campaign were not fought on those grounds. The Leave campaign falsely assured that nothing would change and that we would still be able to trade and work freely in the European Union. They stirred up hatred of immigrants, especially those of color, conveniently ignoring that most were not from the European Union. Not all supporters of Leave were racist, but most racists supported Leave. Story 37. It succeeded in getting some self-serving politicians like Boris Johnson into power. For the average person, it has made travel more difficult and reduced opportunities to live and work in European Union countries. Small businesses have suffered from paperwork, shipping times, and the expense of extra duties on their goods. Many people have noticed a decline in the quality of fresh goods in supermarkets. The only advantage mentioned by some is regaining sovereignty, but this is often ill-defined and vague. It is probably more of an emotional issue for them. Most people who voted to remain did not really mind European Union laws affecting us, as many of them seemed sensible, such as not dumping sewage into rivers or the sea and no roaming charges on phone bills when visiting Europe. Importantly, many of the supposed benefits have not materialized and are no longer mentioned by those who promoted them. Story 38. The truth is that the vast majority voting for British exit did not understand and just wanted to oppose the Conservative Party. Story 39. I have a friend who lives in the United Kingdom. I remember when Brexit was being voted on. I asked him what he voted for. He replied, "There are too many Asians in the country." I stood there for a good 10 seconds with my mouth open, thinking, what does being in the European Union have to do with that? Story 40. Funnily enough, it has gone exactly as all the experts said it would, badly. Story 41. A follow-up question. Why do so many British politicians, even those who should know better, insist that Britain will never rejoin the European Union? It seems like such a no-brainer. Story 42. I am American. Having worked and traveled in the United Kingdom for both an American firm and a Japanese firm, I knew this was going to be a gigantic mistake. Here's why. Many foreign small and medium-sized businesses located in the United Kingdom because of its excellent workforce, English language speakers, and most importantly, its access to the wealthy customers of the European Union. If you were an American company in a niche market, such as industrial test equipment, and you wanted access to the European Union, you could set up a warehouse and office in the United Kingdom. Hire UK staff and have your compliance people conform to European Union standards, which can be difficult. You then have access to 480 million Europeans as well as 66 million people in the United Kingdom. Your UK staff speak English, and everything is smooth and profitable. Then came Brexit. You lost your advantage. Your access to the huge European Union market became tenuous at best. Depending on how much capital you have, you face a tough decision. Continue in the United Kingdom or move to Ireland or Germany. Many, including the American firm I worked for, left the United Kingdom for the European Union. Granted, this was only about 25 jobs lost in the United Kingdom along with the lost tax revenue. But that was just one company that left. Imagine the thousands of small and medium-sized businesses that faced the same dilemma. Huge multinational companies like Apple and Sony are happy to have presences in both the United Kingdom and various European countries. Brexit was no big deal for them. But many smaller firms either moved to the European Union or accepted their sunk costs in the United Kingdom and tried to tough it out. Either option was painful. Brexit was a counterproductive policy no matter how you look at it. Domestic firms in the United Kingdom were hurt or dissolved completely. Smaller foreign firms were hurt or simply left completely. There was no winner. None. Story 43. I am not British, but one of my economics professors once described the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union as the biggest own goal of any country in modern history. Story 44. Remote worker here. I used to be able to travel freely in Europe for as long as I wanted. Now I am restricted to visiting for a total of 90 days within any 180-day period. Story 45. I would like to receive a response from someone who voted to leave and learn about the positive outcomes the country now has. Story 46. No, from what I've seen, the vast majority of people who voted for the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union did so almost entirely for immigration reasons, yet immigration is still the same, if not worse, now. Then there are people who say they voted for it for our sovereignty, to make our own laws and take control. But all our government has done is make life worse for us with zero repercussions, hoard wealth, make corrupt deals, scandals, and take away more rights. Honestly, I feel like the European Union protected British workers more than our own government does. I didn't vote for the United Kingdom's exit, and I hate that it happened. I had plans to leave the United Kingdom. I wanted to study in Denmark, then eventually live in Denmark or Norway, hopefully naturalizing over time, learning the language and culture, and becoming a citizen. Basically, start a new life. But after the United Kingdom's exit, those plans became impossible for me due to much stricter rules and regulations for studying and working that were not an issue before. So now, I think I'll probably be stuck in the United Kingdom for good. I believe the vast majority of people who voted for it were very misguided and misled, and that most now regret it, but there is no point in complaining anymore. The only people who benefited from the United Kingdom's exit are the rich and corrupt elite who can now bypass European Union laws that helped protect against them. They get to rob us blind and take away our rights unopposed. And we can't even leave the country anymore unless you're lucky. If you grew up in poverty and had to work hard to make something of yourself, you are basically stuck. Story 47. As someone who can be extremely foolish, I voted to remain because I knew the benefits of being in the European Union, and I knew leaving would be a disaster. However, I believed that the majority of people would vote to remain. How wrong was I? I have to laugh at all the racist individuals who saw their extremist savior, the hostile political figure Nigel Farage, on campaign billboards and voted to leave because of it, only for us to have an influx of more immigrants who are people of color and from non-European countries. I do think there were plenty of non-white people who voted for Brexit knowing that by leaving the European Union, it would mean fewer white immigrants and more people of color immigrants because it would mean turning to countries outside of the European Union and European Economic Area for workers. But bigoted individuals like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, and Keir Starmer should be held accountable, but they will not be. Story 48. No. Illegal immigration might actually be worse, and many Western European Union immigrants who contributed to society have left. The educated English cities, Scotland, and Northern Ireland voted to remain, but the country has been hurt by insular nationalism. The European Union was by no means perfect and was also perceived as France and Germany limiting United Kingdom influence, but it was good for the economy. The public had very little understanding of it and should not have been voting on it. A lesson to learn for other countries is not to be too insular. Stop the politics of populist figures. The United Kingdom is only now starting to undo some of the damage caused by a conservative government. Story 49. A lot of people say it has been difficult for international business, which is certainly true. However, it has been a net positive for larger export and import businesses. In the words of a managing director I used to work with, any person with a truck cannot just start an export business anymore. These businesses have seen a lot more activity since Brexit. The regulations mean that it is limited to more established companies, which generally results in higher quality and efficiency in import and export. Story 50. I work for a multinational company that insisted I relocate or lose my job during the turmoil after the vote. I still do not see a viable path home at this point unless I cover the costs myself. From a personal point of view, Brexit continues to be a complete disaster. Story 51. Preface this by noting I remain opposed to Brexit, although I was unable to vote at the time. So far, it has brought nothing to gain for the United Kingdom, except prices for things have increased quite a bit, although you could attribute that to inflation or our previous government's spending choices, or a mix of both. As I was hoping to study in Germany in higher education, the lack of rights to live and study in the European Union without skilled job education, etc., has been very difficult. But I am sure many people who only go abroad on holiday or do not want to move do not mind, as it does not affect them much. Hopefully, I can get myself a German passport within a few years by studying and working there. It looks nicer at the moment anyway. I think it was a ridiculous decision, greatly aided by the spread of misinformation to older generations online, and has not been beneficial. Story 52. As someone who deals with logistics in Europe, I can tell you it is a complete disaster. All the problems, including delays and increasing costs, are being passed down to the consumer, and it is only going to get worse. Do not even start me on the colossal failure that is goods coming into Ireland. Story 53. I like that our politicians can no longer blame the European Union for their failings. Story 54. We saved the European Union by showing other members what a poor idea it is to leave. You are all welcome, friends. Story 55. I was too young to vote in 2016, but my experience is that the cost of everything has massively increased, from food to energy, because the pound sterling lost about 30% of its value the day after the referendum and has still never recovered. Travel is more complicated but still fairly simple and mostly the same, except all passports now queue together, and passport stamps are back. The whole 90/180-day rule is annoying, and the treatment British citizens receive in some countries has declined. Immigration has increased instead of decreasing, which was promised if we left the European Union. Instead of Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians, and Romanians, you now have Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis replacing the Europeans. From personal first-hand experience, I am a pilot in the United Kingdom. My license used to cover all 32 European Union Aviation Safety Agency countries, the European Union 28, plus Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and I could fly any European Union registered aircraft rated to my license with my EU United Kingdom pilot's license. Now I have lost that freedom, and if I want to regain those freedoms, I need to retake all 14 exams and flying tests at a cost of €50,000. I am one of the lucky ones who has Irish citizenship. Since this whole Brexit situation, it has made me, as a young person of Generation Z, think about how the United Kingdom government treats its younger generations. After the treatment we have had from Brexit, including losing the freedom of movement, the Erasmus Plus university scheme, and other European Union benefits, I question how British I actually feel. When it comes to national identity and a potential military draft, which country do I give my allegiance to, the United Kingdom or the Republic of Ireland? Right now, I am Irish, and my British passport is now just an expensive piece of paper made from poor material that falls apart after 5 minutes of use. Finally, I think that the people who voted to leave were either misled or genuinely uneducated. Story 56. Many Brexit supporters say, "This is not the Brexit I voted for." But it is. Their main issue has not been resolved, and everything else aligns with what those opposing Brexit predicted. The European Union has not given in to Britain's claimed superiority or accepted the idea that they need us more than we need them. Story 57. We will probably never really know because people pick a side and defend it. Personally, the only thing I have noticed is that the queue at border control is longer. We love a queue though, so it is a result. Story 58. No, I would be rubbing Brexit voters' faces in this situation if I were not also consigned to the same fate. Story 59. Have you seen what is going on in the United Kingdom these past few weeks? I would say no. Story 60. As an American, after reading many responses here, I have a genuine question. Is it possible for Britain to rejoin the European Union? Story 61. There is a substantial list of Brexit benefits on Twitter. I do not believe they all add up, and even if they did, it would not justify the literal and opportunity costs and changes of the past few years. 1. The Office for Budget Responsibility, an independent financial analyst, estimates the impact of Brexit at approximately 4% of gross domestic product, equal to £32 billion each year. For perspective, the COVID-19 pandemic was more severe, with an 11% decrease in 2020, yet Brexit is expected to have a more prolonged and significant effect on the United Kingdom economy. 2. In January 2024, the Mayor of London estimated Brexit cost the average British citizen around £2,000 in 2023, and the average Londoner approximately £3,400 in 2022. The report put job losses at nearly 2 million, of which about 300,000 were in London. 3. UK in a changing Europe identified immigration alongside sovereignty as the main reason for voting leave. With the end of freedom of movement, which is the ability to travel freely across European Union member states, net European Union migration turned negative, decreasing by 76,000 in 2023. However, this was more than offset by a massive increase in non-European Union migration, which the United Kingdom always had the power to control, inside or outside the European Union, increasing by 504,000 in 2022 compared to 174,000 in 2021. Consequently, A 2023 YouGov survey showed only 9% of British citizens considered Brexit more of a success than a failure, with 62% describing it as more of a flop. I would argue this is due to the fallout from the slow realization that the exact nature of the future United Kingdom and European Union relationship could not be addressed through a simple binary vote. The Conservative Party thus inevitably failed to consolidate around a viable path forward and did not implement what they agreed, doubtless because they knew doing so would cause further damage. It is now time for the Labour Party to have a go. Sadly, I do not think they have a vision either. After having ruled out so much during the campaign, they appear to lack the financial, social, and economic wiggle room to make substantial changes, not just on the future United Kingdom and European Union relationship, unless they reneged on several promises like not rejoining the customs union. Story 62. No, it has not been a success unless you define success as there being fewer Polish people or people from the European Union around. The main issues are economic, with trade being halted by excessive paperwork and tariffs. This has greatly impacted United Kingdom companies trying to export goods to Europe. Also, if you take a holiday abroad or live in Spain or France, you will face more obstacles. It has also affected supply chains, resulting in less choice for fresh produce and typically desirable food items such as French food, further driving up already high prices. Additionally, jobs that United Kingdom citizens are less willing to do are not being filled, causing situations where farmers find it difficult to hire people to pick strawberries or other crops. This leads to a lower gross domestic product. Any money that was funneled to bureaucrats in Brussels, like former European Union Representative Nigel Farage, has likely been wasted on luncheons, private accounts, and parties, this time in London. Money has also been wasted due to poor government policies or mistakes, such as in used COVID-19 equipment, the Rwanda scheme, or corruption involving contracts and privatization. Promises to funnel money back into the National Health Service or other government structures have not been kept. These promises were made with slogans on buses and speeches by people like Nigel Farage and other pro-Brexit supporters, with no apologies offered. Those who foresaw these issues were artists, actors, writers, and some of the smarter politicians. People like Damon Albarn, Banksy, Will Self, and Hugh Grant were all strongly against it. Basically anyone with foresight and intelligence. Liam Gallagher was quoted as saying, "I don't know what Brexit is. Does anyone, really? All I do know is that David Cameron deserves to be punished for bringing it on in the first place." Story 63. No. However, we will never know what could have been. We voted for Brexit but never truly committed to leaving. The establishment did all they could to stay, threatening another vote, treading water, and engaging in endless debates. In the end, several years were wasted, and we now have all the negatives of Brexit without any of the proposed positives. If we had fully committed after leaving, I think the case could have been quite different. Alas, we will never know. Disclaimer: I voted to remain. Story 64. It was always going to be a disaster. We told them it was going to be a disaster. They did it anyway. It is a disaster. Story 65. I am an idiot, and I am an American. But I repeat myself. No, seriously, folks, I cannot imagine why a British person would want to shut themselves and their children away from a future in which they could live and work anywhere in Europe. Unfathomable. True, the United States has Donald Trump, equally unfathomable, but he will be dead soon. Brexit will live for a long, long time. Please accept my condolences. Story 66. No. It has failed in every way it was predicted to fail. Of course, when the argument is presented to anyone blindly led by deceivers to vote for unrealistic promises, they just use the word sovereignty to make themselves feel better. And guess what? The results are the same. Opposition to Brexit continues. Story 67. If you exclude London, the United Kingdom is poorer than Mississippi. You never want to be worse than Mississippi. Story 68. Well, yes. It delivered the one thing it could, which was to exit the European Union. Complete success. Slow to get there, but fully achieved. Story 69. I want to provide some balance as Reddit often goes overboard on this topic. For the record, I voted against British exit and would do so again tomorrow. I believe the benefits of European Union membership outweigh the drawbacks. However, there are drawbacks and valid arguments against the European Union project. That is why there was a referendum in the first place. It is also why other countries, notably Italy, are discussing whether they would be better off outside the European Union. Reddit would likely have you believe that everyone who voted for British exit are racist bigots who are too uninformed to understand the implications. I am already seeing a lot of that in this thread, but I find that characterization to be inaccurate, inflammatory, and unhelpful in any current or future debate about our relationship with the rest of Europe. Again, for the record, I think British exit was a mistake, and to answer the original question, no, I do not think it has gone well. Story 70. It was never going to be a success. Before it, we had many domestic issues, most of which could be attributed to David Cameron and George Osborne's long-term austerity plan. Combine that with Cameron's hubris assuming we would vote to remain. Alternatively, it could be seen as an overreaction similar to Emmanuel Macron's response to the United Kingdom Independence Party gaining support. Apart from Nigel Farage speaking nonsense at every opportunity, I genuinely did not realize this was a hot-button issue when it arose. Partly because the news cycle focused on austerity, poverty, immigration, housing, and the National Health Service. There were bigger issues, and we still have those issues. Now, it is just worse for businesses, artists, and many other sectors. It happened because of a very powerful media campaign of lies that implanted false ideas in people's minds. So powerful that it should be taught in schools to prevent future manipulation. People truly felt it. Now, nobody is happy except the super rich, as expected. I knew it would not work because the Conservative Party could not handle the issues we had at the time. Why would they do better with the biggest shift in intercontinental policy since World War II on top of the already significant problems they created? Story 71. Was it a success? I don't know. But since our lives have been getting worse every day, I can't say it worked. Nothing they are doing is effective. Soon, the United Kingdom will be the country people move out of to find better living standards. Story 72. It was so successful that support for the European Union increased in almost every single member state after the referendum, with the worst case being flat. Even Marine Le Pen removed Frexit from her policy platform. Story 73. The world tried to tell you that it was not going to work, and it definitely did not. Story 74. I was born a few months after the United Kingdom joined the European Union, then known as the European Economic Community, in 1973. Until Brexit, I had been a proud citizen of Europe all my life. I am still very angry that this was taken away from me, as I had never known anything else. I used to run a small business importing specialist goods from the European Union and retailing them online. These were products that no one in the United Kingdom manufactures. At the start of this year, I finally had to give all that up. It became impossible for me to keep passing on the massive costs of doing business with the European Union to my customers. I long for the day the United Kingdom rejoins Europe and I can throw my blue passport where it belongs, in the bin. Story 75. The simple answer is I am unable to find a single measurable benefit. People who voted for it might use words like freedom. In my opinion, they did not gain anything and lost a lot to get it. I can see it being undone in the next 15 to 20 years. Story 76. In the relatively short term of now, it was not as good as hoped for those who voted for it and not as bad as feared for those who voted against it. A few people have been affected hugely, but most people have not been affected significantly. Macro changes like leaving the European Union often do that. To put some context, the United Kingdom continuously voted for high numbers of anti-European Union members of the European Parliament to represent us in Brussels. We had specially negotiated privileges which were due to end, and we were generally disruptive as a European Union member. In short, we were ineffective at being in the European Union, which was not a help to them or us. At the time of the vote, Jeremy Corbyn, one of the United Kingdom's most vocal critics of the European Union, led an otherwise pro-European Union party, and David Cameron, a pro-European Union leader, led a fractured Conservative Party on the back of a failed renegotiation with the European Union to try to avoid a leave vote. Most of our trade was and is non-European Union based for both imports and exports, and the trend has been downward for decades. There was never a benefit in the European Union negotiating hugely favorable conditions for us upon exit. The last thing they need is more countries negotiating under a threat to leave, so trade is more expensive and logistically more complex. It has impacted business on both sides. Like most divorces, it was expensive, and any genuine global trade benefits take decades to have an effect, not months or years. Was it a good idea? Probably not, at least to date, but independence may be beneficial long-term. Would staying have been better? Possibly, but it would not have removed the underlying issues with the United Kingdom's perception of the European Union and vice versa. Day to day, for most people, it has not made any obvious difference. The immigration issue was always a total nonsense. Story 77. Brexit was a poor decision made by politicians seeking political gain for something they expected to fail regardless of their efforts. It was a group of racists and conservative supporters, including Boris Johnson, who aimed to provoke some of the poorest areas of the United Kingdom and gain support for a policy clearly against their interests. Politics as usual. It is no surprise that once it passed, Prime Minister David Cameron resigned because he opposed it and did not want to handle the resulting difficulties that have persisted for years. The cost of living has risen by about 30%, inflation has been both steady and troubling, and farmers have been disadvantaged. For example, European pork is cheaper due to subsidies across the channel compared to British pork. However, United Kingdom regulations for quality are higher, meaning good quality homegrown bacon is more expensive than European pork. Now the United Kingdom is in an awkward position, recognizing the mistake but with many unwilling to admit it, return to the European Union, and acknowledge the error to start negotiating again. There is plausibility for this with possible concessions, including joining the Eurozone, although many believe countries should maintain their own currency, and reinstating the open border system, which would be a positive change. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.